called Anneberg.
Let's remember this, folks.
In September 1944, I was sent to Auschwitz.
My name is Aaron Förster, and I'm one of Chaim Förster's 6 grandchildren. Sadly, our grandfather passed away on February 6, 2017, aged 94. Chaim loved this park, and in his latter years would come here daily to walk his beloved dog Blue, chat to the locals, and enjoy the beautiful surroundings. As a survivor of the Holocaust, Chaim also had an important story to tell, and we hope that this bench will go some way to ensuring that it continues to be told. Having survived the horrors of 8 concentration camps, including Auschwitz, Chaim arrived in Manchester along with his sole surviving sister Manya in early 1946. They didn't have a penny to their names. Soon after, he met our grandma Nan, who he married in 1948. Together they had 3 sons, who bore them 6 grandchildren, and at the current count, 5 great-grandchildren. Chaim and Nan were happily married for 65 years, until Grandma sadly passed away in January 2014. Family was Grandpa's life passion. Throughout his life, Chaim worked extremely hard and built up numerous successful businesses, employing hundreds of locals in his factories. He loved his work and rarely had a day off until retiring at 92. Finding himself with time on his hands and at a loss for what to do, he decided that now should be his time to educate people about the horrors of the Holocaust. He visited numerous schools all over the country, telling his story of survival and the dangers of racism and discrimination. If you would like to hear some of Chaim's story of survival, including recordings of his testimony in his own words, please press button number 2. When the Nazis invaded, Chaim was just 17 when the war broke out. Born in Poland, he lived with his large, close-knit family in Sosnowiec, close to the German border. When the Nazis invaded Poland, their hometown was quickly overrun, and the occupiers embarked on their ferocious persecution of Sosnowiec's 28,000 Jews. The casual murder of Jews in the area became part of daily life. People were dying in the streets from starvation, beatings, and illness.
In early 1941, a very painful incident took place, the memory of which still haunts me. Life was becoming more and more difficult, and my parents decided that I, as their only son, stood the best chance of survival and should try and travel east. I remember vividly being packed and ready to leave our apartment. I was in the kitchen, saying goodbye to my mother and father. It was terrible. My mother gave me a blessing that no enemies should be able to do you any evil. We were all in floods of tears, and I only got as far as the first floor stairs before deciding I could go through with it. I couldn't leave them. On August the 12th, the remaining Jews of Sosnowiec were rounded up in the town's sports stadium and kept there for 3 days. There must have been about 1,000 Germans with machine guns surrounding us. It was then that the selection began, as the Germans began deporting Jews to Auschwitz. This was the last time we saw our mother, as she too was sent to Auschwitz. We were all devastated. In every home, at least one family member had been sent to Auschwitz. In the streets, you could find little children searching and crying, "Mommy, Daddy, where are you?" To no avail. Hours later, German trucks were driving around, picking up these unfortunate children and sending on to Auschwitz. By 1944, I'd already endured the hell of several German labor camps. I suffered hunger, cruelty, and in February 1944, whilst in Greatest, typhus broke out. The Germans sealed the camp and left us inside. People were dying rapidly. There was no medication and no help. Some of the inmates, who had been doctors, tried to help as best they could. But in 3 weeks, only about 200 out of the original 2,000 inmates lived there, but for the grace of God, I survived. The typhus did get to me, however, and I took ill with higher fever and hallucinations. I do not know how many days I lay there, but when I came round, I started to try and sit up, and my head started spinning. Eventually, I managed to sit up, but I was completely naked, in a mess. I thought I'd better go down to wash barrack and clean myself up and find some clothes. I was on the third level of the shelf like bunks and was so weak that it took me a small half hour to get down. I looked at my hands and body. I was a skeleton and could count every bone in my body. When I entered the wash barracks, I found a large number of naked dead bodies stacked on top of each other, 6 one way and 6 on the other, on pallets. Once the typhus had passed, those of us who survived were sent to another camp called Annaberg. In September 1944, I was sent to Auschwitz. This was extremely frightening. I was shocked. We arrived in cattle trucks in the middle of the night after a 24-hour journey with very little food. When the doors slid open, the quietness and stillness made me shudder. There was a heavy smell of carbolic. As I looked around, I could see electrified barbed wire for miles and miles. Every 10 meters or so, large light bulbs illuminated rows of barracks as far as I could see. In the distance, I could see flames coming out of chimneys on all 4 sides. I did not realize it at the time, but these were the flames from the crematoria. The following day, there was a selection. Some had to go to the right and some to the left. My group, which was sent to the right, went to the shower room, where we were showered. We were tattooed. I still bear that on my arm, and I became another Jew, another number. I became number B10924, caught in the firestorm of that murderous death camp. The others who were sent to the left were never seen again. I remember getting friendly with one of the old inmates, and we got talking about the place. He said to me, Chaim, over there is a block with about 110 Jewish children. They're getting lots of food and toys, all they need. I can't understand why they're doing it. 12 days later, we could see these happy faces on lorries being the gas shippers. I knew the only way to survive was to try and get out. And that chance came 6 weeks later, when I heard they were selecting engineers for another war camp. After various tests, I was selected, with a few hundred others, was sent on a packed cattle truck to a town called Niederroschel, where I was set to work assembling wings for Younker planes. Here we were treated reasonably, and we heard news of the first time that the war was going against Germany. By the beginning of April 1945, the Allies were closing in, and so our captors shut down our camp and forced us on a death march. We marched endlessly for about 8 days. Some died and others could go no further and were shot where they lay. We arrived in Buchenwald concentration camp on 10th April 1945. The place was in chaos. Other inmates told us that several hundred prisoners were being taken out daily and shot a short distance away from the camp. After surviving so much for so long, was this the end? On the morning of the 11th of April 1945, we were called for roll call, and we being counted, ready to be marched out of the camp. Suddenly, a number of American planes appeared on the horizon. As these machines loomed above, our guards and captors took one look and started to run. What were we to do? We were weak, starving, and we had no idea what this meant and simply sunk to the ground. We stayed like this for a few hours, when suddenly, like some kind of mirage, American tanks drove through the gates. The soldiers on board were shouting, "You are free! You are free!" We couldn't believe what we were hearing. We sang and danced on the roofs. We kissed and cried. To be able to stroll alone from the camp without a guard with a machine gun was unthinkable. No work, no roll call, and no counting. Then the soldiers began throwing large blocks of chocolate at us. We leapt on them. We finished them very quickly, and many of us were sick from it, as we hadn't had such rich food for years. It was true, we were free. Several weeks after liberation, I was lying on my bunk and trying to realize the consequences of the last few years of my life, when to my astonishment, a fellow inmate came running and shouting, Chaim Förster, your sister's looking for you." I was confused. My sister, alive? I hadn't seen her for years. How could she be here? Was I going crazy? He told me to follow him, but I wouldn't. I didn't believe there was anyone left in my family. After much persuasion, I finally got up and followed the man who had come to fetch me. There she was, my younger sister. So small, so thin, like a little bird. We hardly knew each other. We could only look and wonder. Slowly we stumbled together and hugged, our bodies so thin and bony beneath our embrace. But we were together, alive, after years of misery and separation. Our family, what was left of it, was coming together again.
After being reunited, Chaim and Manya began to make plans. Having heard how Sweden had offered a place for survivors to recuperate, they gained permission to go. They were in Sweden for around 6 months, until one morning a man called Mr. Marcus arrived asking survivors if he could be of help. Chaim and Manya knew that they had an uncle in a place called Manchester, but they had no idea how to contact him. They told Mr. Marcus that his name was Bernard Forster and that he lived on Broom Lane. Chaim wrote a letter and Mr. Marcus arranged for it to be delivered. In February 1946, their Uncle Bernard brought them to his home in Manchester, where he couldn't have done more for them had he been their own father. Life and hope could finally renew itself. And now, a final word from Chaim.
Our dearest wishes that our testimony is carried like a baton from one generation to another generation, so that the world will never forget. Never forgets.
Thank you for listening. Grandpa's biggest fear was that within a few generations the horrors of the Holocaust could be forgotten. Please help us ensure that this is never the case. If you would like to know more about Chaim's story or those of other survivors, please email familyfirster@gmail.com.
Please share and let this never happen again. Let's remember all those who survived and who perished during the Holocaust, who were murdered. Let's never forget this. Share the love. Peace out. From Blind Explorer 2226, folks.